the railway, like Cambridge's women, with more shelter from the wind. As you can see on the left of your picture. Reeds to negotiate early on, but then it starts to open up. It's non-tidal. There isn't necessarily that advantage that you find on all the bends on the tideway. But the women's race has certainly set the standard high. The bar is high for the men, because that was a gripping race up from Ely to Littleport. 3/4 of a length just between it. And a big moment this as we look at the umpire's launch. Bosporus just preparing with Sarah Winkless, the first woman umpire in the 166 races of the men's boat race, a British Olympian, a medal-winning rower in 2004 Olympic Games. She was 3 times in a blue boat. She was the president of the Cambridge Women's Boat Club as well, and 3 times a winner. She then has the honour of taking charge of this event on a beautiful Easter day in Cambridgeshire on a stretch of water she will know well, having trained for those 3 years as part of the Cambridge Women's Boat Club. First place is what counts, though, and that's the key message that underpins the hours, the weeks, the months of preparation and training for the rowers and their coaches. There's a sign in the boathouse at Ely which the rowers all walk past each day they go into training, when they've been able to during this really difficult time with 3 lockdowns since the academic year started in 2020. And this sign reminds them of their purpose, because there's a door and a sign above it which says very simply, where we prepare to win boat races. And how special it would be for that man, James Forward, 18 years old, not going to be 19 until August. GB Junior already, looking to be a winner. He's taking part in a very special event. Not quite in the shadow of that magnificent Norman cathedral, more than 1,000 years old, but it provides a spectacular, magnificent backdrop to what has been a beautiful day and also a remarkable day of rowing so far. 1 race gone and another still to come. Cambridge, the winners of the women's race, and now the men are settling by the stake boats, ready for their race in just over 2 minutes' time. Cambridge won in 2019 by a length. They also won in 2018 by 3 lengths, just 1 1/4 lengths in 2017. It's been tight. And what's so engrossing and intriguing this year is that we have no fixtures to run off at all. Both crews have confidence in their own ability. Many of them have been involved in boat race day, be it for ISIS or for the Blue Boat, but none of them in 2021 have a grasp of what the other is capable of. Yes, they focused on their personal bests and their ergos and their rowing machine performances and in their pieces on the water in training, both at Wallingford for Oxford and here for Cambridge on the River Great Ouse. But this is race day. This is when it really counts. This is when the experience of the big occasion counts, where experienced contenders like Martin Baraxo, Canadian international, 7 World Championship appearances, won a bronze for the men's 8 for Canada in the 2019 World Cup. May not know that his cousin Julia Lindsay lost in the women's boat for Oxford. Felix Drinkel, the president in 2019, the blue boat also in 2018, back again now. Who can marshal the nerves? Who can produce? How much will home advantage count as we prepare for our commentary team, Andrew Cotter and Zoe Tedelido and Matthew Holland.
Ely Cathedral has seen it all before over the hundreds of years, and it watches down over the fens and the boat race. They have not had an official men's boat race anywhere but Putney to Mortlake in almost 160 years, but today the noise of Putney becomes the far less busy Queen Adelaide. Chiswick Bridge by Mortlake is the village of Littleport, and the wide and twisting Thames is the narrow strait of the River Great Ouse. But the feelings for those involved will be the same, the tension the same. The arms of the Coxies are up. They've been sitting on the starting pontoons for a while now. Oxford won the toss. They chose the west bank, the slightly favoured west bank with the wind coming in from the west-southwest. And they sit and wait. And Sarah Winkles, what a moment for her and for this event, that Sarah Winkles, the first woman to take charge of the men's boat race. Jessie Oberst in the Oxford coxing seat with his arm up, and so too Charlie Marcus on the far side for Cambridge. Just a smile from the calm and relaxed Drew Taylor in the stroke seat for Cambridge. Jessie Oberst is happy, not happy. So again, the boats will just be drifting around a little bit, and the Coxies want to make sure they're absolutely square. I'm with Matthew Holland and Zoe Toledo, who've both coxed the boat race, and no time for a word at the moment because both Coxies are ready. Oh, we do. Quickly, Matthew Holland.
As you were, umpire Sarah Winkler says both crews have indicated they're not yet ready. And it's a bit of a game here. You'll see the Coxies looking across. They're telling their crews, you know, he's got his hand up, I've got my hand up, so that no one starts when they're not ready.
Jessie Oberst is happy now, so Charlie Marcus, we are waiting on you. Cambridge Cox. There we are, and there the moment was gone. The window closed, Charlie, and Jessie Oberst puts his arm up.
Not quite as challenging as doing this on the tideway, but still a bit of wind coming across the boats here.
Attention.
The red flag drops, attention goes, says Sarah Winkles as the umpire of the 166th men's boat race. It is Oxford in the dark blue on the west bank with the slight advantage perhaps of the shelter from that bank. And we saw how close the crews came together in the women's race. So far, a good distance between the two crews in the men's boat race.
Yes, Sarah Winkles had asked these crews to stay 2 to 3 metres. She wanted space between the blades, and so far they're giving that to her.
This is an absolutely brilliant start from both crews. You can see the distance between them is equal to the stagger at the start. It looks like Oxford are rating slightly higher, but Cambridge incredibly clean here, just putting the blades in, getting on the legs very quickly.
And look at how close they come together now. Both crews being warned by Sarah Winkles as they power out at about 40 strokes a minute. Then they'll drop down to 34 or so for the bulk of the race. But Cambridge with the stronger start. They did have a slight stagger, 75 centimetres further forward they started, because there is a fraction of a bend round to the left. But Cambridge certainly with a more powerful start.
This was not what I was expecting, having spent the week watching them both train. The Oxford's first 750 metres is incredibly impressive. They looked in training to be really blasting out of the block. So this is an astonishing performance from an underpowered Cambridge crew compared to the Oxford boat.
But you can see the swing of the Cambridge blades there, and they look very tidy and very accurate.
This is the point that Rob Baker was making. Sometimes crews, you don't see the pedigree that they have and you think they might be inexperienced, but something happens when they get on the water. They gel and they work together as a crew. Now, they might have gone out too hard, but they're moving so well at the moment. Yes, Oxford might be keeping something for later on in the race, but what a start by Cambridge, and the barked orders by Sarah Winkles, because Cambridge are putting a squeeze on Oxford and almost ushering them towards the reeds there, which start to creep in.
This is utterly, utterly beautiful rowing from Cambridge. You can see the rhythm from outside the boat here. I could almost feel it like I was in it myself. Cox Charlie Marcus taking a little bit of a risk sticking towards the middle of the river, but it's really done his crew some massive favours. Look at that lead at this stage in the race.
Yeah, again, he needs to be careful here because he is being warned. He needs to get his crew clear. They are rowing a beautiful rhythm. He just can give them that chance to fly out there and go.
You know, it's that overhead shot as we look down at the dark waters of the Ouse, which shows perfectly why Sarah Winkles is warning Cambridge at the moment, because the angle, and there we are, Charlie Marcus is being told to move now, so he's got to be careful.
As I said earlier, as soon as you hear your name, you're in trouble. And Charlie is taking quite a risk now. But look at how far up his crew is at this very early stage in the race.
This is a really vital part of the race here. You've got to hold contact. In a one-on-one race like this, you cannot let another crew get clear water between their stern and your bow.
Well, Cambridge have had enough warnings here. Charlie Marcus continues. Even though they have that lead, you can see how much they are almost in the water of Oxford there. So Cambridge again being told to move. So Catherine Granger watching down on the water. You can hear all those warnings from Sarah Winkles. It's frantic stuff.
Sit, boys. 136. Locking, loading. 3 minutes down. 11
start right from the beginning from Cambridge, but what you can hear, as you repeatedly said, is Sarah Winkles, the umpire, just warning Cambridge over and over again. She's doing it again, and actually as an athlete you start to tense up, you start to get nervous, because if your cox isn't responding enough, that's where the risk is going to come from the umpire rather than the opposition, and it'll give Oxford the chance to start moving back.
Much like we saw in the women's race, Oxford are down, but they are not letting this go.
Umpire Sarah Winkles has just said there is an obstacle in the water up ahead, some weed, and she wants both crews to move apart. This is a key moment now. The umpire is issuing an instruction that the crews won't be used to here, saying, actually, for safety, I need you both to move back to your stations.
There we can see in Oxford are going straight for it at the moment. You hope it isn't anything too sturdy. And they move past it now with no damage seeming to have been done now. Oxford beginning to make a little bit of a move here. The warnings, I mean, Sarah Winkles has been kept busy here. Both crews being urged to keep apart, but Oxford looks to be putting in a push.
This is where the psychology of the training really comes into play. Unlike previous years, these crews have not had a second eight to race against, a reserve crew, and they have not had fixtures in order to practice their racing.
There's such a difference, as Cambridge are warned against, such a difference between training alone in sheds or in gardens, on ergs, indoors in gyms if allowed, and being out in the water. And as Zoe says, they don't have their warm-up races this year. They haven't raced against the clubs. They don't really know, or the international sides. They haven't had that experience of having a crew alongside them, competition, opposition, but they certainly have that now. And Oxford seem to be digging in, and Cambridge have to keep them at bay.
Oxford are working really hard there, and they have reeled Cambridge back, but it's still quite a considerable lead for the early stages of the race. And certainly in the stern of the Oxford boat, the stroke Augustin Wambasi, Joshua Bousman-Jones, it's going to be very quiet down there for them. They can't see the crew. All they can do is feel their puddles. They don't know whether they're a length down, 3/4 of a length down. So they're going to be relying on the guys in the bows to really tell them they're still here.
Yeah, only James Forward in the bow seat and Alex Bebb, the president, in the two seat will know that they are well within contact at the moment. Still the warnings come as we look at the Oxford crew, and you think about the experience in there of Tobias Schroeder and Felix Drinkel, the bright young tyros of the British rowing scene. They've got great plans beyond the boat race, and the experience of Baraxo as well in the three seat, the Canadians. So they have that experience, but Cambridge seem to have something special, gelling together on the water. Drew Taylor in the stroke seat, the tall, lean American who's sending down that rhythm to Sullivan and Parrish and Holden and Richardson, Seb Benzagree, Ben Dyer and Theo Weinberger in the bow seat, and it's still working well enough for Cambridge, but Oxford do seem to be creeping back.
Again, Cambridge had nearly a length. They nearly had a chance to break this race and finish it, and now Oxford have come back and are just half a length down.
Well, a little bit of a reverse, sorry, Matthew, of the women's race, where Oxford went out harder and more impressively, and Cambridge came back into it. Although in the women's race, Cambridge were already getting further back into it by this stage. Cambridge are still holding off Oxford, but I think we are set for a classic race.
Absolutely. It looks like now the Cambridge crew is starting to slow a little bit. Perhaps they're starting to feel it in the legs. This is the hardest bit now. When your opposition are charging at you, you sat up, you put in a lot of work to get up, and now you just start to feel it. This is going to be where Cambridge really have to hold their nerve.
Now this is Sean Bowden's 27th season. You can see here coxswain Jesse Oberst driving his crew up, and they are just squeezing back. But Sean knows exactly what he wants from a crew. He knows what he wants it to look and feel like.
It's fascinating just watching that very light touch by Jessie Oberst on the rudder cables there, because as we've talked about it before, too heavy a pull on them and that really is brake. It's just a tiny thing, the rudder. It's the size of a credit card controlling something the size of a bus. That's what Charlie Marcus has described it as. But look at Oxford coming back here.
Charlie Marcus has taken a big risk here, but I think actually, on hindsight, he's done the best thing for his crew. I mean, the middle of the river is faster, and Cambridge go into this as slight underdogs on paper. So I think to take a risk and put yourself in the right place was a very bold move, but it looks to have paid off. Sarah Winkler certainly earning her keep here.
Looking back down the Queen Adelaide Strait, this wonderful strait of river. It's man-made, it's artificial. It was created in centuries past for trade to be brought down, but it has left us with this wonderful strait for racing down. And what a wonderful race we seem to have at the moment. Halfway, and Oxford continue to be kept at just a third of a length down on the light blues.
Both crews talked a lot this year about how they built community through their online teamwork. They haven't had much chance to get together. You know, a few of them live together, but a lot of them don't know each other that well. And when you are half a length, a third of a length down, you need to trust and believe in everyone in your crew.
They're coming to the 3K into the race now. This is the final 2 kilometres. This is where it starts to get really bleak. The features are gone. There are no more houses, just a tree. And Cambridge still sitting a half length up here, but they won't be comfortable. This is not a comfortable enough lead to ensure victory, and I can see this race changing hands. So the Cambridge crew are going to have to work very, very hard if they wish to retain their advantage.
It remains at just that. James Forward, the blonde-haired figure from Nottingham, the 18-year-old who wants to become one of the youngest ever oarsmen to win the boat race, but he's sitting there parallel with about Garth Holden in the 5-seat of Cambridge. So Cambridge are keeping Oxford at bay, and I think I heard Jessie Oberst, the Oxford Cox, a few moments ago saying this is our water. It's not, it's Cambridge's water, but Oxford desperately want to come here and take victory on Oxford home water, on Cambridge home water. But what a race at the moment.
I think Cambridge are starting to move away again. As I say, they've got that instinct. They know exactly how far they've gone. So Charlie Marcus is willing to take a risk with his crew and say, actually, boys, let's go now and try and put this to bed, because you all know exactly how much you've got to give. Whereas in the Oxford crew, it won't feel instinctive that there's 1,500 metres left for them. So they'll be less willing to take a risk and put themselves past the red line.
Cambridge are absolutely not going to let Oxford come here and try and turn Ely dark blue, are they?
What a sight, looking down on the shining dark line of the Ouse, cutting across the flat land of the fens, and two slender boats side by side. It doesn't have the twists and turns of the Thames or the history of the race on the Tideway, but still a thing of beauty. And Cambridge being warned against, they have to move towards that east bank.
So now you see an interesting conundrum starting to arise, in that whereas before, when Charlie was being warned, Cambridge Cox Charlie Marcus, and he sat in the middle, there was no risk of contact, so he was really safe. As soon as the blades get close and you're being warned, you're in big trouble. So now he's started to move away.
Catherine Granger, it's exciting watching from here. I'm sure it is down in the water as well.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm very glad I don't have a heart rate monitor on, because right now it would be very high. It's been a phenomenal race, and it has been so close in every sense. Cambridge seem to be very comfortable sitting in their middle part of the river. Do get repeatedly warned, but haven't so far looked as if they could risk clashing with Oxford. Oxford are comfortable, slightly more in the shelter. There's still a buffeting wind coming across, but I don't think the wind is making a huge difference. But we can see the bridge, we can see towards the finish line. The Coxes will have that in view, and anything could happen.
I'm really on the edge of my seat here. This is one of the pluckiest rows I've seen in the boat race in a while. Cambridge, reasonable underdogs in this, and they've gone out exactly as you need to do in this match race. They've tried to lead from the start, they've taken control of the race, and they've not let Oxford try. Oxford have tried and attacked them, but they've not relinquished control here.
I can confirm that Matthew Holland, who coxed Cambridge women to victory in 2017 and the men in 29, is literally on the edge of his seat, jumping up and down. Zoe de Toledo, former cox with Oxford and the Great Britain squad as well, is looking more relaxed, but it is just a great race, and it's remained at that margin there for some time.
Yeah, and this could come down to who has a more cohesive sprint to the line. You know, this isn't enough to call the race now. We still have the best part of half a mile to decide this, and Oxford are starting to just creep back again.
This is that brown tree marks the last 1,000 metres of the course, and both crews are going to start trying to gun for it now. Oxford are in a position to take more of a risk because they stand most to lose. Cambridge can wait a little bit longer because they're so far ahead at this stage, but Oxford really should be taking a risk, taking the rate up, doing a push, throwing the kitchen sink at it so they can try and get that bubble ahead. But Cambridge look to be walking away again.
Yes, into the final 1,000 metres, and how many thousands of metres they will have rowed on indoor ergs and put some hours in on the water this year, but not nearly as many as they would have in previous seasons. They have come together late as crews, didn't get out on the water together until the start of March, and it seems that Cambridge are coming together slightly better as a crew. It's just working better for this less fancied, less favoured 8 at the moment, and they are keeping Oxford at bay. Both
crews are striking 34 strokes per minute, but Cambridge have I've just heard Charlie Marcus call them up to 35, and you can see in the bows the oar of Garth Holden starting to pick up the front end, starting to really drive the boat on as he looks to prepare for their sprint.
Well, with every metre of the great ooze that disappears, Oxford's chances disappearing as well. They're going to have to find something special in the final 750 metres or so, but from this view, and indeed as we look down from above, it looks too late now for Oxford to come back. Cambridge still in control, still getting warned, but Oxford are hoping for a miracle.
I think Oxford here have got to keep their heads up and just try and stay as relaxed as they can, which is incredibly hard to do when you're down coming into the final sprint.
This is now where Cox Charlie Marcus starts to take a real risk. His crew is sufficiently up that if they hold that margin, that will be a big victory for a straight line course. But if there's a clash and he's been warned this far down the course, he could be in trouble. So if I were Charlie, I would start returning to my station and just give my crew the cleanest run into the finish.
Into the final straight then, the final stages, and the bridge at Littleport waits for them. The finish line is at the tree before that, so Cambridge are heading for victory surely now, and the ducks will scatter, but the light blues of Cambridge, the cheers are for them as they come home, because these are home fans who are able to gather in the gardens that line the banks of the River Great Ouse. It is going to be Cambridge after victory on the Thames in 2018 and 19. Now in 2021 on home water, it is still theirs. Cambridge have the victory by about the same margin as in the women's race, near enough a length, and what a race, what a win for Cambridge.
That is one of the most extraordinary performances I've ever seen on this stretch of water. I think Cambridge took such a big risk going out that hard, and it really, really paid off. Cox Charlie Marcus took some risks with his steering, but it was a very good move in hindsight, and I think that was the most incredible performance from Cambridge that I've seen. I was not expecting it to go this way.
No, and, well, those in the know supposedly weren't either, because Oxford were the slight favourites. They had the slightly favoured lane as well, although I think the conditions were not favouring either side of the river in that regard. But Cambridge have done it. And I think, as Rob Baker said, there is just something special about this crew.
Yeah, they did look exactly like he said. They really gelled. And despite not maybe being as strong on paper, they just looked like a more cohesive unit.
Well, there we are, the pictures that say everything, really, for the beaten crew and those who have come and tried before. And think of Felix Drinkel, who has rowed in 2 before and has lost twice. And there are the echoing celebratory cries of